Okay, welcome to our restorative session today. We're going to be doing some elevated shapes, some restorative inversions. So what I want you to have is either a bolster or a stack of blankets at the wall. And the height of the bolster or blankets could be the height of a standard size bolster. I have a round bolster. It's a tiny bit higher than the standard, and I felt like it's okay for my needs. So I'm going to go with that. But you could have a stack of blankets, or if you happen to have two extra blocks, you can use the extra blocks. Just set them at the second setting against the wall. Then you're going to have your bolster lengthwise, standard size bolster down the mat. So you want to have this so it's spine wise, I like to call that. And then a blanket at the back that's low. Have your sandbag next to you for the beginning position, and also a belt that is buckled up into a big loop. Okay, so let's get started. I have lots of props here. I got a 7-inch massage ball, extra blanket blocks, and besides the other items. So you'll want to just get all of your props that you have plus your wall space. So let's get oriented into supported bridge. This is my favorite. I think this is my favorite restorative, one of them. Okay, I have a few, but this is one of my favorites once I get settled into for my breathing muscles. So you'll have your stack of height at the wall. I want you to step your feet up onto that. Sit at the very lowest part of the short end of your flat bolster, and then you'll be able to push off the bolster at the wall, and you'll lower back. I know this will take you at least 1 to maybe 3 times to get the alignment right. And when you lower back your head onto the blanket, I want you to see if you get it the first time, you somehow will get an extra bonus. You'll push your feet into the wall, worked out, and then you can slide a little bit back, but I want you to feel like you are elevated from the feet, wall, feet, thigh band. So if I'm pushed enough into the wall, it should not hurt your knees, should not hyperextend them. There's a little bit of lift. Now, if this for some reason doesn't feel right, you come back up. You have to shift the bolster under you. Maybe it's higher under you. But what I really want you to have is that your shoulder blades are just barely squeezing into the bolster, and your neck, right, has its natural curve. But if you touch the top of your shoulders, they're not pushing into the floor. So you're really observing this rib lift. Okay, take a sandbag carefully across the thigh lids, lower than the navel, so we don't have sand high up. It's down to the legs, and if you decide not to use the sand, it's perfectly fine. It might take you more time to kind of fiddle around with your props in the beginning here. Okay, you know, if the pressure into your bolster increases, that's going to be normal if you have sand. So let's let the shoulders start to send the muscles into your arms down by the sides. You might bring the arms straight down. If this feels like it's slightly pressing in the shoulder, then you also could do this position with the arms straight out to the sides. Just be sure that you can feel comfortable in the chest breathing. Okay, so I like to move my elbows wide sometimes on this, although the science behind this one is, since you're lowering blood pressure and heart rate, it would be arms are lower than the heart. Even though I like to do this, maybe the science tells me if I'm doing it for health benefits, right, I could find this might be okay. It takes me time to be comfortable though with my arms low. And let the weight of your head rest back. Find the height of the blanket that just works well for you. Could be higher than this one, could be lower, could be no blanket. But recognize the ability to elongate and lengthen the front body. Breathing slow and turning your focus to the alignment first. Feel the feet touching the wall. It's always okay to come out of a pose and reset if it just doesn't feel right and you're thinking, when is it over? Okay. Although the pose begins when you want to get out is a good, I like that line. I feel like that's true sometimes, but you want to feel like you can absorb the circulation from this position, from the shape. Breathing with the ribs, feeling how the breath moves high up into the upper lungs. Exhale smooth. Nostril breathing. Okay, now if the arms are out to the side, see if you can guide them in closer. So the palms are open and they're relaxed, right? They're not trying to push out, they're just soft down to the hands. Okay, now feel the imprint of the parts of your feet that do touch the wall. I think we naturally find a habit where they might slightly curl, they might lean to the side of the foot. So just even the bottom of the foot, but to the side, little toe side, some of us will press there further. So really feel if you can make an imprint into your wall. It's a good thing, right? You're really focusing towards the concentration at the base of you, even though the base of you is the back line of the body, all the way through the back into the shoulders. Okay, so we're going to gradually move into a modified cobbler's pose. You'll use the bolster like it is here, but you'll slide back ever so small amount to begin. You want to start small, then you can make the movement back further if it feels like it's better for your back. But once you slide back, it's hard to get back forward. So make those choices just moment by moment. Okay, so sliding the sand off the thigh lids. We're going to bring our knees up to point, feet on the bolster. Okay, this is where you have to decide how far back you'll go. So I tend to feel my upper shoulders, upper back, well, actually just upper back on the ground first. I kind of come off the bolster. To me, that's plenty. And then bring my feet together, knees out. But I'm short, so that works for me with this bolster length, right? You're a little taller. You're going to probably scoot a little farther back. Let the knees motion out. And this is a modified Supta Baddha Konasana. Slide the blanket back so it's not under your shoulders. And let the arms settle down by the sides. One reason I wanted you to have blocks handy today on this end is so on this pose, if you want to have the blocks, I recommend using support when you're restoring. So I'm going to use the blocks at the highest setting, and I'm actually going to tilt them in. This is one where you have to play with it. If you've done this a few zillion times, you'll figure out how it pushes the skin to stretch out the adductors. So if I point my knees up, put my feet down on the floor of the bolster, tip the blocks in so they're turning a little bit inwards at the high setting. I suppose some of you might find the block at the second setting works well too. But when you let the knees motion out, I really got to pin the block in. It worked on the first time, perfect, to the legs. And then it actually kind of helps that skin, that circulation flow even on the outer thigh. Okay, so yeah, there's an interesting SI joint article that just came out with yesterday on this position, discussing that, of course, we don't want to do poses that are overly stretching the hips either. So we want to find stability, right? Especially SI joint. So just get a feeling, since there's that connection from sacrum to ilium, that there's this ability to observe this kind of vast land, right, of circulation in the adductors, also the lymph drain here. So if your knees, right, don't feel like they can be supported, you can always scoot the blocks out further. Some people are fine with no blocks on this, but just be aware, it's kind of a deeper stretch. Deeper into the hip, it pulls around. Don't overdo it, okay? It's okay to do stability patterns that are even comfortable. And then the hands down and the breath for about another 30 seconds, since we've been here a bit. See if you can train that mobility in the lower abdominals. So there's the ribs expanding, there's lower abdominals gently motioning, exhaling completely. Okay, so prepare this lower basin for the inverted cycle with the legs lifting. So since this is important here from the lower than the navel, right, organs, I want you to get a feel that when you move the block slightly aside, the knees to point up, right, you'll put the blocks, I would just put them both over to one side. Either side's fine. And then step the feet so that the heels touch down first besides your bolster. You might scoot the feet apart from the bolster, but don't overdo it, right? It's not required that you take the stance so it tightens your back, but feel when you push into your feet, you're gonna basically feel that you squeeze the muscles that surround the buttocks, right? The glutes. And I want you to feel the weight back into the upper back, just the right amount, and we're going to actually turn the bolster that's underneath us to horizontal. So how can you do that without causing too much disarray? So that's definitely a practice, isn't it? I first touch the bolster before I lift my hips up. Then I try to push it to one side, then lift my hips ever so slightly, just a little bit, turn the bolster across, and then I want you to scoot towards the wall. So you're going to reach your hips. And this is kind of fun to do posterior movements. Right? We're usually so front motion that to get our back to slide around is a little tricky. So I want you to slide down so your bolster's across the back of your pelvis. So where you are with this, with the back of your pelvis, the bolster really is pretty high up. It's not right around your thighs. But I don't want your seat to be on the other side of the bolster entirely either. I want you to sit on the floor on the other side. Okay, now step your feet to the wall and see if you can feel the wall. I want you to be close enough that you can touch the wall again. If you can get the wall, then you can get enlightened in this pose. Okay, make sure that the seat, again, is not too far over. It's going to be a matter of personal choice, right? What feels like it's giving yourself some, it's almost like this back cushion. It doesn't have to be some harsh world, right, with the poses. It could be just comforting. I have a cushion on my posterior. Okay, so I got my blanket under my head. I'm going to make that blanket one more fold. So it goes under my head. So I have a quarter fold. Okay. That could be too high for some of us. So if you push down on the blanket and it's around the base of your skull, around your neck area, I want you to be sure that that's actually encouraging that support for your upper back. Grasp onto a couple things here. We're going to need a belt. Okay, we're going to need a sandbag. And I would recommend to get that sandbag now if you're using one at all. So when I place the sand, I'm going to actually turn it so I pivot the sandbag so it's lengthwise straight down the top of the left frontal hip. And then I'll bring the right foot onto the blankets or bolster that's at your wall. Now, I suppose if you're using blocks, the same thing's going to work. You could still put your left heel on a block and the right foot onto the other one. So either blanket or bolster. Now, if you decided your blanket stack is getting too low, you can add a blanket. It's probably okay unless your left knee right now feels too extended. And that's why you'd add things. Okay, so I find this interesting. So I put the sand on the left thigh, the foot is touching the wall. Got to be a little careful that I don't hyperextend. So I'm going to push through the ball of the left foot. And when I bring the right knee up, and you start to move it closer to your chest, you're going to get the belt. Still, it's buckled up, it's in a loop. Use the loop part. I don't think you use the other part, but I've done that before. You're going to try to scoop up. If your left foot comes off the wall to get that, it's fine. Scoop up the right foot and stretch it straight up. Yeah, and take some time here to figure this out with your orientation to the wall. So the foot still should touch the wall. I'm tempted to look at my foot to make sure it's not turning out, but I know if I feel like it's turning in a lot, it's probably straight up and down. Okay. And always kind of peek, but you gotta look over a sandbag. Okay, first things first, simplify. Just hold on to the foot. Nothing extreme. Pull and explore that range at the back of the right thigh. Okay, let the field of movement start to come in. So I bend the right knee, I do a little softening of the knee. I glide the leg back towards my chest. And I can choose to be here, holding the belt with both hands. Okay, I can also take the belt loop and place it to the back of my head center. So it's around the shelf at the back of my head, right, the occiput. But you might find that holding the belt with your hands is fine. This is a second option. As long as your left foot touches the wall, that's key. If you're losing the wall, you've got to loosen the belt up, less strain. Okay. Now this is interesting, but seems like it's too intense today. Then I would opt for hands inside the belt, slide it off, and bring the hands to touch together in a prayer position with the belt around the webbing between the thumb and the index. That thenar web space is what that's called. There's a few words for it, but when you do move the arms back, this might be a good kind of go-between on the two pose options with the belt, if it's not behind your head. Okay, now feeling that length at the back of the right leg. Feel the belly move with your breath. Ribs expand. Just notice if it's the ribs that are moving or if it's just the belly, right? Since you're tilted, it might feel kind of belly full. And do what's comfortable. If some of the directions seem too much, you can always back off. Great. Okay, now let's push. If you got the belt behind your head, first thing, taking that gently off the back of your head. And you'll slide it off and let your hands grip onto the belt and you'll push your right foot just straight up and down, a little forward from that vertical position, a little towards the wall. And I like to have this position with the hands to feel the sensitivity in the connection from my lower abdominals, kind of so as kind of lever movement. I find this to be pretty fun. If I have a hold of the belt, it's casual because it's around the webbing of the thumb and the index. I really like that pass of movement. Okay, now taking one hand out of the belt, you're going to slide the sand just onto your lower abdominals if that's okay with you. You can also put it on the floor, but it's just extra work to drag it back up. Less work. Okay, now, and you're trying to work with now moving your left foot up into the belt. Be efficient. So the right leg lowers down. You're going to take your sand and just pivot it so it's a sand shift straight down. And now some of us will push the sand back farther down. I'm just cautious on any knee pressure, although I could see a world where that could be effective with circulation. You want to feel like there's some traction. And as I put that sand on the front of that right thigh, then I either take the belt to behind the back of my head, option. If one side seems like it's just not quite receptive to that, you might make the loop bigger rather than judging it or spending energy on, come on leg, be the same as the other side. You might have to vary the length. Okay, you're either here or you've got the belt. You're going to hold on to it with the thenar web space, okay, between the thumb and the index, that web. And then the web space, it has an interesting amount of motion. It's curious. Depends on if the palms are together, but regardless, there's so many other things going on with the lower part, the leg touching the wall, the leg up, and just feeling if the leg kind of moves around to eventually find a stillness. So you're reversing the effects of gravity back towards the heart. Relaxing the heart. Sometimes having the belt at the back of your head is nice too, because your arms are not straining. So there's a world where both of these could be actually calming. Yeah, if the foot is coming a little bit off of the wall, kind of make reach with that right foot. It doesn't mean you have to get up and move around. It might be how you're elongating from the skin on the right thigh, how you're pushing. You could actually make it touch the wall just by the efforts in your circulation. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to get up. So elongate. Use the sand to help you maintain that length with that front right thigh. The wall's a good teacher, isn't it? Because you go, oh, not really quite reaching the same as last side. You'll know. You'll have your footprints on the wall. Another task to take care of, huh? Wall with footprints. Knowing that you're doing a practice. So the other part would be feeling how my back stands. It's kind of a width to the back muscles with the bolster. And allow the breath to be this constant provider of inner motion. When you have that inner movement, even if the position seems kind of still. Okay, now, if you've got the belt behind your head, take a hold of it, move it off, let your head lower down, and let's pull on the belt with the left hand, and you'll slide the sand off the right thigh. This time it just goes away from your thigh, but keep it close by. So it's not a bad idea to even have the sand kind of still. I still have mine on my bolster. It's barely on there, but it'll be so easy. Actually, let's do this. Let's put it besides the bolster because I don't think you want it to disrupt what we're doing. Okay, so changing minds. All right, that's what they're there for. So take the right foot up into the belt, push both feet out into a wide stance. Yeah, so inverting, right? Reversing, and a gravitational pull on the muscles as much as the organs here. So I like to hold the belt. Some of us will find just let go of the belt, rest your hands into your center, to your kind of solar plexus zone. You might find this is not shaky and it works well. There could be a reason that this is a better drain because you're not gripping. The arms are relaxed. So again, let the body receive the circulation from these pathways we're working through. We're going through pathways in the body. Breathing through the nose, movement of the core, ribs and all. And if you're holding the belt, you'll slide the feet together by holding it. And if your belt is hands-free right now, it's kind of tricky to get your feet together without getting a hold of it at some point, but try bending through the knees so that you'll obviously feel this hip hinge position, bending the knees, the legs towards the floor. And that's about it. They only go farther out, right? They're not going to get any closer. So I want you to reach up to the belt, and when you pull, keep the knees in a strong bend for either versions actually, and bring your feet together. And let's take the belt off. Take whatever's a cozy in between counter pose. It might be circling the knees, and it could also be hugging them into the chest. Depends on how comfortable you are with this bolster, lifting your hips up. Going both directions, either holding onto the legs or letting them go on their own. Okay, get a hold of your ball. If you don't have this size ball, if you have one that's a little smaller, that's fine, but probably a tennis ball is too small. Okay, all right. I never tried this variation with a tennis ball, to be honest, but you'll place the ball between the knees, and you could also use a block. Right? If you use a block, it would be at its most, lowest setting between the knees. Now, first bring your feet to the floor. Okay, that you can tell it's a little bit arduous in the center. It's like, a little tightening. This area has been kind of crimped and pushed up, so you might reset your bolster, make sure it's truly across. Okay. All right. Now, if you get a feeling of your elbows either pointing out to the side or a little bit towards the bolster, either's fine. I want you to press down into them. So use the elbows to push down. Feel a light amount of arch into your spine. I don't want to say chest and ribs because it really is the spine that starts that. Breathing. Okay, and then as you push down into your elbows, you're going to lift up the knees. Okay, find where there's a complete lift. That's important. Is what is a complete lift? Well, it's a lift where the knees, if they were to keep going, they go up to the ceiling or sky. Okay, they're not going to go to your chest. They're going to go up. Okay, now arms open out to the shape of a T. Go straight out with the arms. Okay, nothing in the way. And knees go side to side. No requirement to push into the ball in any extra way, but we'll use it as a spacer. And just kind of feel just the side to side of it all. We've gone away from the knees being straight up. We're on to the next direction. But feel when the knees go side to side. That loosening in the back. Now this is where we can actually move the knees towards the arms if you feel like that smooths out the back. You've been in a position for a while that's a little challenging for the circulation in the back. We've really been working it. So if your knees goes just straight across or they go towards the arm, that's fine. Okay. Now, as we move the knees back into the middle, I want you to try to squeeze into the ball, push into it. Now, if my knees are towards my ribs, that's fine. I want you to try to keep it so they're more in that pointed up position, yep, versus squeezing it. I don't even know if this would be relatively helpful if I brought my knees to my chest. Okay, so there's a little bit of tone in the thighs. That's ideal. You can feel the tone gripping. They're awake. Okay, now remove the ball. Watch out for the knees going together. And you're going to place your blocks are going to go one on each side of your bolster. So I'm going to slide my sandbag up so it's not right next to my bolster. And I'm going to take a block to each side so it's at the second setting. I think some of us might go lower than that though. Some of us will find if our blocks are low, it's going to be more of a feel like it's more. But remember, more isn't better, right? With stretching. It's not like we want to overstretch our hips. This one's partially the essential support for stretching the waist, right? And the waist is sort of an extension of the abdominal muscles, right? The feeling of stretching into that area. I think of it as all kind of connected, but it's interesting to work with it. So now I want you to move your knees over to the block on the right side besides your bolster. So your feet could go from closer to your rear to a little bit away. We're not going into the full leg straight version of this. Okay, the knees go to the block. And then this is elevated reclining twist. This is the classic shape in Relax and Renew, and the chapter on I think it's the generic restorative sequence chapter, but I have to look back at that. Okay. So I'm going to place the sand on the outside of the left thigh from the hip down towards the knee. Mine happens to almost fill that space, kind of in between it. And then I'm going to kind of get a feel of this blanket. I think it might be almost too high, but if I feel too much roundness in my upper back, I could lower it down. Here's where it might work great, is if you turn your head a little to the left. Yeah, I think I gotta go lower. Okay. Yeah, you decide if it feels like you go lower and it's more work, that's less rounding, I would just stay with it. Turning your head to the left, though, is going to be interesting for some of us, not all. Okay, so let your head turn left, feel your arms span wide. Breathing. Okay, now that weight on the side of the leg should feel like it also impacts the hip, impacts the lumbar spine. If you don't have a sandbag, it's okay. You can still do the same pose. You might find that you need to keep the legs close together by touching onto them. If you don't have a sandbag, like on the side of the left leg, you could just gently press down. That could be effective too. But let the ribs move, expanding. Let's give it about another 5 to 6 breaths. Okay. Now, when you shift, it's only to the other side. but going from one side to the next is going to require you to go through the midline. So this is quite that crossover. If I turn my head, I do amplify the movement right in the upper outer edge of my left chest. And so these little subtle things I think are curious on releasing holding patterns. Okay, so when I let my head turn back just to center, then I just grasp onto the sand and I bring the knees in. Now my block, I hope I have my block on the other side. We'll see. When I come back in center, go really slow. Try to keep in motion. Keep in mo. In mo. And go slow. It's your back that you're living with, right? So if you need to stop in the middle and just be there, that's fine. If you keep going in motion, it might be useful. Then bring the knees over to that block on the left side. Yeah, I can try the block lower. It just feels too much for me on my hip. Again, just working with that. Important to find that motion, that if you don't ever stretch it right, then you really stiffen up. So there's got to be some in between that's healthy for the aging joints, right? We don't want to overdo it, the ligaments either. We want things to come back to neutral after the sensation of movement in a stretch. So the right arm can open out, your head can turn maybe, and this isn't for everybody. I've even seen some people that just really like to use like the ball under the back of their head to do these kind of movements. I find that way too much flexion in my neck, way too much. But to each his own, right? So you might find the sand is a little bit different on the second side where the application of it is. Maybe you have it a little bit higher on the hip. If this hip feels like, oh, it's sore, it's tight, just it's really feeling it, you might pivot the sandbag, use the weight of it for weight bearing on the hip. Remember, we want to do weight bearing work. Sandbags are useful and they're easy, right, for that idea. Just put them on. So you might find some different tactics. Now the knees are not going to be straight in line, right, because of your pelvis, because of all these other parts. So they're not going to be perfectly stackable. Just there's no way. So, work with that. I mean, there are some practices where people teach this with the legs over both of them. I think that's a good pose. But for now, we're going bending and we're letting the waist move with the breath. Maybe feeling even the upper back touch down. Maybe a little bit of shrugging. Feels like a little massage for me on this side if I do a little bit of shrugging with the shoulders. And balancing the movement of the breath. And this whole practice is kind of a different part of your brain you're working, right? You're doing this muscle memory work. It's really interesting, right? So just taking the time, how many other things you would be doing besides this? I'm sure there's so many, but just give your body the benefit here to reset, to circulate. The feet might be kind of together, cuddling. The feet might be close, kind of wrapped around each other. If anything comes up that feels too jarring, it starts to get too tense of a stretch, you can always come out. You can always alleviate where you feel it's coming from. Maybe the sand starts to add on. I don't think the sandbags get heavier, but the body shifts, right? The transition, if you breathe out and maybe something feels like it's elongating. But I think this could be kind of a nice change. It's going to be a big change because we're going to go from supine to a lateral shapes. but I want you to notice how the side is probably really seeking to integrate. Okay, so what we've been doing. So we're going to slide the sand. Now let's go with the sand over to the left side of your mat. Just let it drop left. And it seems like an easier transition that we would just simply go left and come up. But it's probably intelligent for our back to carefully hold on to the side of the left leg and bring it back up to center with both knees. And maybe just let the knees go bit side to side. Kind of smooth out. Arms could be cast open. You can enjoy that circulation across the back. It's interesting how the ribs might feel centered on this, like they're pinned in the middle. Okay. Okay, let your ribs know it's going to be different soon. So now when you go, I want you to be calm in the abdominals. So we don't want to shock the abdominals by kind of pushing straight up to sitting. You want to be soft and comforting. Don't scare them. Okay, roll to the left and move the knees down. And then as you come up to your hip, you're going to get ready for side sage. Now let's go away from the wall with it. So we're going to push the flat bolster in the center. Okay, this is when we can move away our bolster at the wall, I think. Yeah, maybe it'll come up again. So I want you to have just the standard flat bolster. Then take your other blanket. Let's say you had a whole stack of them. I know some may have had some for the wall in the last shapes. You could have one blanket for comfort, like underneath your left hip. You could just have it really flat for sort of a softness in this pose, since you might have extra blankets. Or you're going to have two stacked on the other side. So they're in a quarter fold. Okay, let's get a ball. Place it on the inside of the right knee. Your left knee is bending, right? So the left knee bends and it parks, the thigh parks next to the bolster. Okay. Then overhead, hey, this is one where if you did have the extra bolster or a block, you could toss that onto the other side. Think of that. This is what happens when you study certain types of yoga. Okay, when you study furniture yoga. Okay, so lean to the left and then head down to the blanket. Make sure it's plenty. Right? I don't want you to feel like your neck is tightening up more. And we also don't want to overstretch it. So you got to find if you're a little bit more to the back of the skull, to the side. But get the sand on the left or the right side. Okay, so I'm going to put the sand either across the hip or lengthwise down the side. I like this version sometimes. Today, I can use this length. Okay, so again, right, the abdominals, right, we're mapping the way gravity flows, and the side stretch is kind of an extension of the abdomen. So when you reach the right arm overhead, it might touch. You could touch a bolster, a blanket, a block is great. The block on the highest setting, right? If I have my block overhead, it would be like this, right? Instead of my bolster, it would be straight down, hand would be on top. This is too high. I think it's too high, but I'm going to try it anyway. See if it's true or not. Yeah, so if I had like a chair seat to put my hand on, that would be nice. What I feel is if my shoulder feels like it's getting more, it feels more shrunk wrap around the joint, then I decide that my height needs to either go up or down. For that, when it was higher, it was too much. And down, it's a little easier. And if it doesn't work for your arm to be this direction, it could very well be you would bring your arm down by your side and or on the bolster. Okay, so settle in, make sure the legs are finding that coordination, the shape, and the side band. Any little fussing you need to do. Breathing. Yeah, sometimes moving the stance is hooked right at the hip, and it brings that perfect traction. Ribs moving with the breath. each of these directions internally and change the way gravity flows through the body. So feel the momentum, especially on the exhalation. Even if you're considering just getting out of the pose and doing something else, this is a good moment to notice, because exhales are usually like the prep before moving along, doing something else. Just feel how you round back into the inhale. And now before we come out, feel where the arm overhead could be a little bit more relaxed. Maybe it's on the bolster. Okay, and then really feel how the ribs move with your breath. They're not in a heightened state of pull. If my arm is overhead, oh, I can feel my ribs. It's a heightened state of sensation. Now it's a little softer. Let my head rest into my blankets. And just kind of strum the ribs with your breath. Play the ribs. Take a few moments. Anticipate shifting. It happens. Okay, that nice little length on the side. So as we slide the sand off, if you're using that, I want us to kind of curl the movement of the back. So we're going to come around into cat-cow. So let's move the ball away. And you'll bring your hands between the bolster and the blankets. If you happen to have a blanket under your knees, perfect. Might be just what you need. So if you need to add your blanket, add one here under the knees. You don't need these exact blankets here. They can be used other places, but hands, knees about hips distance, if not wider. Yeah, feel what it's like in that distancing. I find my hands wider than my knees works better for my kind of into my hips, my SI joint. It feels like my knees are too far out. It's achy. Okay, so you don't want to be in like frog pose. Right? So tops of the feet press, round your back, chin towards chest. Inhale, arch. Chest is forward. Exhale, round the back. Feel that delicate motion of the spine, the ribs, a little bending of the elbows. Inhale, arching. Okay, last time, exhale. Spine motion. And gently arch. Okay, now change the second side sage. See how simple that was. So you might move your hips a little bit side to side like you're wagging your tail. Just kind of feel how this stretch moving the hips reaches through the waist. It's tricky to do this without trying to pull the belly in, but let it be relaxed here. Movement. Okay, and now when you get to that second side, you can tell how when you're in the shape, there's not a great range of movement. So in between counter posing is nice. I wouldn't say it's kind of counter movements. It's not counter pose. It's not counter pose, it's counter movement. So down to the right hip, all right, getting to the second side. You're going to find what's on the other side of the bolster is some things that you can put your arm on. So it's all for one arm, isn't it? So I'm going to lean down. I like to add my ball first, but the first side, right, I have slight differences. So I've got to kind of look at, okay, I'm about the same with my equipment placement. Sand goes to the side. I ended up last time feeling the best with the sand across the hip. Remember, the duration of the pose is really what's important and the restoratives. So you do want to find that you can get comfortable. Okay, and that left arm is overhead. Okay, I love this bolster for this one. This is feeling really helpful. If it's too far, right, you can try to roll it in closer. Sometimes they have if it's a round one, they sometimes roll around. But feel where the length is. You don't want to be trying to grasp onto it and tug it. So you want to make sure the bolster is comfortable too. Doesn't feel like there's tension that's going away. If it's a blanket stack, it's no problem or a block. But feel where the hand is either touching overhead or on the bolster, on the side. The right arm, it doesn't really have much it has to do. But it is doing something in your back just by being simply crossed under. It's interesting, it's like half of the direction of arm variations like eagle pose, that's half of the position there with the arm assignment, but it's pretty easy. And then as you settle in, feel how the ribs on one side get to lengthen, and one side they're pretty neutral. Relax your head. In the final few moments, make sure the left arm is entirely comfortable. So if it feels a little pinched with the arm overhead, it's time to let that left arm find more comfort. It's perfectly fine to do a little less with the arm and feel a little bit more with your ribs movement with the breath. Okay, now with the weight into that right side, right? It's not just the one area, it's the whole side. It's all the way up into your skull. Okay, now I want us to thread from our kind of our spine awareness into our, basically out into extremities. So when you push the sand over, I would just push it off, not rely on your movement to get the sandbag somewhere else, just push it away. And then when you roll to the right, you're going to push down and come up, and let's take hands, knees, and let's move a blanket underneath the knees. So if you don't have one, get a blanket now so it's right under the knees. Your feet are at the wall. We're kind of wall reliant, huh? Yeah, the other blanket's not going to be good to have on the mat here, and whatever else you got on the other end will kind of make its way. All right, so turn the bolster lengthwise so it's underneath you, straight through, towards the end of your mat, and you're going to add, I think blocks will be essential, but let's just have them on the other side of our bolster, so they're at the highest setting, just an extra case. Okay, so place the hands as wide, a little wider than the bolster. That way you can't be closer in with the hands. The bolster tells you where to go. And, wiggle a little bit through the waist. Let your head lower, let your ribs move, let your shoulders engage in movement. It's kind of a zigzag. But get a feeling here, if you can motion your spine to cat pose, push the floor away, And then when you naturally arch, inhale, chest forward. And then this time you're gonna exhale and push up with the knees and step in towards maybe a downward dog of sorts. And I encourage you to let the heels be up at the wall unless you are just so excited to stretch your calves, which feels good to me. Reaching my heels just towards the ground and pressing the floor away. You let your head descend down. If the bolster is in your way, it's good. I want you to use it. So if you happen to touch the bolster, don't try to touch it. If it just happens to be there, then you can touch it. But don't try to round your neck to touch the bolster. Okay, if it's just a strand of hair, it's okay. All right, now pushing the floor away. And if the heels are up, I want you to now walk the feet a little forward. So you'll walk your hands back. Your heels will start lowering down when you don't have your hands pushing the floor away, huh? Walk the feet forward. If they're up on the blanket, that's okay. But I don't want you to force that. So if you decide to have the feet touch up so you're creating that natural stretch for your calves, you could do that. I'm going to have them flat on the ground and then lean my sitting bones to the wall. Woo, you can definitely feel how this changes your breathing. It intensifies that flush right to the sinuses. You sound funny in it usually. I don't hear you, but it does. You can tell the influence on your respiratory and circulatory system here. Let your head relax. Okay, now relax the arms. If you're too close to the wall, if you feel like it's an overstretch, you can shift your feet a little farther away from the wall so your seat can touch. It should feel pretty full in the face, like the skin cells of the face are just filled up. So like if you're doing it right, you're going to sound stuffy. It's quite the flush. Okay. So as you bring the knees to bending, I want you to scoot if the blanket's there, I would just leave it. I'm just going to put over the tops of my feet and then walk the hands on forwards. And you're going to lower down your knees on the blanket. And your feet will likely touch the wall quite a bit. And as you push down into that variation of crocodile, I want you to bring your hands, make a stack with your forearms, and let your forehead rest on. The forehead is likely resting closer to a wrist, but when you're releasing down, you're going to have to find a part of your body to touch into and let the hips find center. So if you need to take the feet farther out on the wall, I would recommend that so the hips can center. If the bolster's too crowded under your chest area, you can either bring it farther forward or farther back. You probably don't want to bring it all the way to the wall because your legs don't have independence then. Give it a few breaths here. Now visualize that someone has just put a sandbag across your back because it's too much strain to do it. Or you can. Okay, now feeling how the back it's in suspense is when I think of this. This is kind of a back in suspense. Movement of the ribs. Okay, now when I move my head to lift up, I slide my hands to the sides, elbows close to the sides, and then lift up through the chest, forward, arching. Okay, keep that momentum of the spine. And you're going to come back to table. Carefully scoot the knees so they're settled on the blanket and grasp onto your blocks. And we're going to have the opportunity to move our bolster off the mat. So we'll slide it aside, push it back. and add a step with the right foot. So I'm gonna have my blocks under my hands, step the right foot between them, and then glide so my left foot touches the wall as the front of my left thigh. It gradually lengthens. Okay, we're not trying to go into the splits. We're gonna keep the right knee bending. But I want you to emphasize this natural kind of carving of sensation through the left front thigh, not just the thigh, but up into the hip and into the abdominals, the psoas too. Okay, so the left foot could push into the wall. It could just be there. I like it to just be there. But I want you to feel what it's like to import pressure into your right foot, push, lift up the back knee, and then use the left heel at the wall to give you some impulse to kind of move into that lunge on that right thigh. So if I have my left heel up, I feel that stretch forward through the lunge. Breathe. Exhale. Okay. Now this is a pretty neutral lunge. It's not overstretchy in the back quad, but you take a moment if you can, as you are lowering the back knee to the blanket, I want you to feel the spine go into that natural arch. Lift up the chest with the hands down. Right? It makes it a little challenging. My hands have to stay down. They don't go up to the ceiling. They don't go on my thigh, but they're down the blocks, lifting your eyes, stretch them up. Okay, and then center, lift, careful motion here. Back heel is to the wall, so I don't want the whole bottom of my back foot trying to stretch up the wall. I'm going to use that momentum of bending the right knee and stepping the left foot besides the right. It seems natural to get up to standing out of this one. I want to do that, so I want you to have choice here. You can keep the forward bend, bring your blocks forward, head down. You can take your arms out, bend, pushing into your feet firm to bring the arms straight up. Lift up the hands. Okay, lift up the fingers, independent hands, not together, hands apart. Turn the hands out, inhale, exhale, forward fold. If your hands were still on the blocks and you were in that forward motion, we join you, okay? And then step the right foot back to the wall, lower down the back knee, and stretch through the front of the back thigh. I can definitely feel a little difference from quad to quad, from knee to knee, how the concentration is around the joints. So try to give them equal opportunity to kind of thrive. So if you need a little bit less, if you're more sensitive on one side, maybe you bring your blocks in closer. Okay, maybe you kind of notice if you're bracing for it with your arms, that you might let your palms center and put a little bit more circulation into that left thigh, as long as it doesn't twist in. Let your torso move to the left thigh. Breathing. And just feeling how the front of that back thigh is lengthening. Okay, now, this to me feels like a little bit more effort. I'm putting more effort into it than I intend to. So I want you to use the prop. So feel the wall with the foot, feel the lift of the back knee. Scoot so the heel is up at the wall, so the bottom of the foot has a pretty good stretch. Bend the left knee. Breathe. It only helps. I know this is pretty balanced pressure right now in all the extremities. Okay, nothing overdoing it, just feeling the left knee try to stretch forward. Okay. Okay, now this side we're going to take a wide stance before we come back to the lunge. So I want you to turn your left foot, turn the foot, toes towards the right side. Sorry, so you're turning toes to the right. You're going to take your blocks with you to that right side, and your feet are in a wide stance. This is a really good basic hip opener pose, but you don't have to overdo it. So I like it. It's also a good quad kind of engager. So that's curious to me. So if I take my wide stance, and I can take the blocks forward and lower down my arms, or I could keep the blocks here and kind of feel where there's concentration from my center of my heart back to my abdominals. I like that too. Now feel if you can do this. Now, if your hands are all the way on the ground, and okay, that seems like a realistic version for you, okay. Okay, but I don't want you to try to bring them into besides the feet. That's another version. But this one, the hands could be down or they could be on blocks. You can even put the blocks lower. And I want you to take a twist. So you're going to turn to the right and bring the right arm up to the ceiling and feel that left side body kind of turns in, both the extremity of leg and arm. Good. These are kind of clever circulation for the body. I like this yoga stuff. Okay, so turning and bring the right hand down, let your head relax. So skull resting. Feel the arms input, the legs input, skull resting. Ribs move with your breath. Like you got a big cape on your back, you're filling it up. Okay, turn to the other side. Left arm goes open and feel that right inner thigh is stretching. Your left arm goes up. Your ribs start to turn, lifting up through that left arm, breathing. Only interested in the range of, just the required range here is to simply turn, not overdoing it. Okay, now left hand down, good work. A lot of work. Okay, take the blocks with you to the left leg. You're gonna walk onto that left leg again to the lunge, but this time we'll lower the knee to the blanket. I know we did that earlier, but back down to the knee and stretch through the front of that right thigh. Okay, we're going to balance these into bridge pose in a moment. So I want you to get a feel of now that we've gone each side, each front thigh. Okay, now to come out, we sort of have to tense up the front of the thigh, which is curious, huh? So you're going to slide the left leg back so the hip flexors, right, find their neutral position. And I want you to take a moment when you roll onto your back, just to kind of feel when you stretch your arms forward, move your ribs a little side to side. Maybe take a glance of stretch through the front of the thighs that feels like a variation of up dog. Okay. Now we're going to slide one knee forward and lean into the seat and turn towards the wall. Okay, make it pretty swift, this transition, because the hip flexors will start to forget what they're doing. Okay, so push the bolster flat against the wall and take some blocks next to your sides. Have a blanket at the back. You can unfold it when you get there. First things first, get onto the bolster with your feet. Take your blanket so it's low under your head, really low. It could be no blanket or a little blanket, but only under your skull. And then I want you to push your feet to the wall. Lift up the hips. Okay. All right, so you get a feeling now when your feet go up, they can slip, okay? So there's a lot of bulk in the upper back when you lift up your hips this high. Now lower down so the spine gets a little bit of massage. Okay. All right, now feet on the bolster. Take a block. Take another. They're on each side of your hips. They're at the second setting. Lift up your hips, slide the blocks under. Get those blocks centered side to side. I've seen this taught with the blocks the other direction, horizontal. And some reason, this is what I was taught with it, so I keep with it, but I think horizontal makes sense too. So I want you to stretch the legs down, and if you need to scoot away from the wall a little bit, do so with the blocks. Don't go too far away, because I want you to feel your feet imprint into the wall. Sort of like what we started with today, a little bit, right? So this hip flexor zone lengthens. I want you to get a feeling of your feet as parallel as you you dream them to be. I dream of parallel feet. Okay, the balls of the feet are gently pressing. Belly moves with the brow. You just let it be without sand on the thigh lids. Just let it be. So there's ability to open up in a space that's off of the floor. Elongate the neck. The arms could be down by the sides, palms open. I like doing this where I touch the block. This is why I like the block this vertical, this length direction. I like it this way because when I touch the block, if it was horizontal, I wouldn't get as much reach. And when I try to bring my shoulders back, and my ribs neutral, not overdoing it. And then let the palms open to the sides. Towards the ceiling is really all they're doing. Okay, these final few poses, right, are really driven to balance around the midsection. Feel movement of the torso. And just allow yourself to receive wellness from the practice. Receive the circulation. And you can feel that what's between each hip area, because that's like bone awareness. I got this, I got this. What's in between is sort of, it's essential, right, to living organs. So we're going to take a little bit of circulation in there. So I want you to push your feet firm and then bend the knees so the feet are on the bolster. You feel the feet push. And then as you start to lift your hips up, you're going to gently lift up the tailbone. I want you to be careful about how much you scoop. No big scoops. Okay. So just a little bit, and then slide the blocks away. Just a little bit of lift. Lower down the spine. Kindness to SI joint, just a little bit of that lift. Spine lengthens all the way. Great. Okay, now push the bolster to the right side of your mat, off the mat, and then we'll take a crossover. I would use a ball and a sandbag or a bag of some weight on the legs. So you're going to bend the right leg and then let the left leg bend and sweep over on top of the bolster. Ball goes around the sacrum area. These two are options, right? The ball and the sandbag, but they can add a little bit of extra energy into it. So energetically helping you motion. So the ball is really just an anchor, and the sandbag is weight, right? So left arm is open. Let your head roll to the left. And just feel that movement in the ribs. And just truly let the weight of your head settle. If you need more blanket under your head, you could take one more roll or fold of the blanket. It can be helpful. This one that makes a lot of sense to have a little bit of blanket. And visualizing that crossover of below the heart into the ribs. That goes left, the thigh band goes towards the right, that crisscross in the waist. Massaging the inside. Okay, now sliding first the sand, the ball, and just like that crossover earlier, we're going to go to the other side right away, so you don't want to shock the sacrum. So you'll bend through the knee, and then you'll gradually guide the other side of the back to the same thing. So bend the right knee, foot down, left foot down, and then shift the pelvis back to neutral on the back, and then place the bolster with care for your back. You don't want to strain or sit up to do it, but place the bolster to the left, and then bend the left knee, and the right leg swings over to the left side. Yeah, I sometimes take ultra caution on these. Like they can be such therapeutic pathways in the body. So really feel from your breathing that insight. And then as you add this ball to the sacrum area and the sand to the outer right thigh, that you don't have to strain. It is a lot of energy to put yourself into this placement. And then let that right arm just feel where it opens to that right side, the right amount. And it happens to be the right side, not the left amount. And then let your head roll to the right. Last pose before legs up, which has now become our version of Shavasana for some reason. I've somehow decided that's what it is. And it's up to you. If you don't like to do something that much energy at the end, you could relax on your back toe as well. Okay, but feel for a few moments here this crossover angle in the waist and the hip. Breathing. Visualizing that lower kind of portal of the lower spine into the back of the pelvis, that length on that right side, just believing that is spacing itself for loosening up. And then when you remove the ball and the sand, you want to push the sand over to the side that down towards the wall. And then this time is different. We'll roll to the left side. Be smooth with your back, and then coming up and take the bolster to the wall. Blanket pulls towards the wall, pretty close. You don't want the blanket straight out on the other side of the mat. Sit up next to the wall for Viparita Karani, and we're on the edge of the bolster, and you'll swing the legs upside down. If you decide not to put your legs up at the wall, they could be up over a chair or a couch or a bed, right? It's nice to have them in some lift so you can reverse the effects of gravity on the heart and draining lymph. Okay, so my legs are upside down as I put the sand on my feet. And as I bend the knees, I find that length at the back of my body that I was just thinking on with the side stretching is essential. So I don't mind having a moment where I be with the knees bend. And then as I let the legs go up, I feel that circulation, which is circuitry, leg circuits, and then let the legs just be upside down. Perfect. Spine. Maybe it doesn't need to get wiggled around too much. It's a pretty interesting platform for circulation in this pose, right? Just having that length behind you. It's so nice during the day, right? It's in a different association with gravity than this. So, if anything, this is good just to do other things besides our daily habits. So, coming into the shape, let the arms flow freely to the sides with no distractions. Feel the amount of movement of breath in that lower abdominal. Breathing in through the nose, exhaling out through the mouth, letting go. Finding where that stillness resides, possibly in the neck. You want to keep it centered. You could let your head turn a little bit, but feeling where there's just the appropriate settling from the base of the neck, the brain stem down, and then feeling that weight of circulation at the upper back. And let the arms have their movement of reaching out to the sides, just straight out. You're in a T position. Keep the arms out as you do a slight bend of your knees, and then shift the feet off of the wall, ever so small of a movement. Could just be inches away. And it feels different in the gravity of the situation in the abdominals and the diaphragm. Huge difference. I mean, for a diaphragm, it is, maybe not for your brain, but yeah, it does require some strength there. The sandbags are interesting to work with in different attempts at strengthening breathing muscles. Okay, great. Let the knees bend and take the sand. As you go, you could just take it off with your hands or toss it overhead with your feet, a foot toss, and hug the backs of the legs. Let the knees be comfortable, so you just hold the larger parts of the leg. They go into the back nicely here. And then roll to the side. Take a moment when you roll into that little shape that you use your arms to bring you up, and then taking a seat on your bolster. A moment of gratitude for your practice in your bones, in your mind. Bring the hands up to balance in front of your heart. And breathing in here. And exhale, bowing into that space behind your heart.